From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Gemma Gaudette. This is Idaho Matters. Four women of a certain age are back, and this time they're on a mission to find out who's trying to kill them. I'm talking about Deanna Rayburn's sequel to the wildly successful novel, Killers of a Certain Age. And that's right, Billy, Helen, Mary Alice, and Natalie are all back in action with the new book, Kills Well with Others. And we are lucky enough to have Deanna joining us to talk more. Deanna, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, let's go back to the first time you wrote about these four women, and that is the book "Killers of a Certain Age." For folks who haven't read that book, give us a little brief history of these four women and that first novel.
Well, the four women are paid assassins. They work for an organization that doesn't belong to any particular government. It is extra-governmental, international, and they only end up killing people who need killing. And they were recruited when they were 20 years old. And during the first book, they are trying to retire at the age of
hmm
60, but they just can't quit murder.
When you published this book, did you have any idea that it would really take off the way that it did?
Absolutely not. My publisher did. They were very confident. But it was so far out of my comfort zone to write that book because up to that point, I had only written historical mystery. And so to write a book that was a thriller, that was contemporary, there are some flashback scenes in it, but they're
hmm
flashbacks to the 1980s and I don't even like to think of that as being considered
So
historical
long
fiction.
ago.
Oh my
Uh-huh.
God. Because in my head, the 80s were 20 years ago.
Right.
Because my internal mathematical compass has never adjusted to the 21st century. So, I really had to push and write something that was very, very new for me. And it was absolutely terrifying. And it wasn't until well after the book came out and it did extraordinarily well. It was number 9 on the New York Times bestseller list, which just, I mean, I sobbed when I got that phone call. And I was having a conversation with my publicist at the publishing company and my editor and told them, I had no idea if I could even write that book. And they both looked at me like I was, just completely deficient in common sense. And they said, okay, we knew you could do it. But I didn't. I had no idea. And the
Uh,
book ended up, it was very much a labor of love. And it tested me in ways I have never been tested before as a writer. And luckily, it turned out to be exactly the book that I wanted it to be. I still go back now. I never reread things that I write, but I had to go back to read a few scenes that I needed to make reference to in the second book. And so I went back. And of course, the first thing you do is you nitpick and you go, well, I don't know why I used that word there. Um, uh, but it's so yeah, I will see all of its flaws, but it's still very much the book that I wanted to write, and I'm very proud of that book and delighted I got to write a sequel to it.
Okay, so I want to talk about that. So, when this book became so successful, and I have to say, yes, it's a thriller, but I mean, it's funny as well. And I know, folks, if you're thinking like, how can a thriller and four assassins be funny? It is. And and this next novel has a similar feel to it. But what I mean, was it again your publishers being like, all right, this was a great novel. We need to see these characters again? Or did you also just feel like maybe their stories weren't finished?
Oh no, it was down to the publisher because we knew when we put out the first one that if it did well, of course there was going to be demand for a sequel. So I had to make sure that I had a little bit left in the tank. So I
hmm
gave them at the end of the first book, they get a happily for now,
They do.
but there's obviously more room for them to have further adventures. And I wanted to give readers a sense at the end of the first book that, okay, if this is all we ever see of them, we can assume that things went great. We can assume that they lived out their lives and everything was fine. But if
hmm
the publisher was going to give me a chance to mess with them again, I wanted there to be scope for them to, maybe find that retirement isn't always everything it's cracked up to be.
So talk a little bit about that because this is about what, a year or so later, and so they've all kind of been in retirement,
Yeah, I
and
think
they're
about 2
still
years later, something like that.
yeah, and they're still kind of trying to find their footing, right? And some of them have, I mean, they've kind of found a rhythm, but at the same time, it's like, really, is this what retirement looks like?
Well, isn't that the struggle that a lot of people have when they
Right.
retire is who
Absolutely.
am I without my work? I don't envision ever retiring because my being a storyteller, being an artist is so much of what I do. I did it way before I was ever paid to do it, and I will certainly continue to do it long after people have ceased to want to publish me. um but I think that's a struggle so many folks have is they are so closely identified with the work that they do that
Uh-huh.
when you step out of that role, who are you? How do you fill your time? How do you identify yourself? How do what is your sense of self? Where do you find value in yourself? Just existing, is that enough? And just the mundane, literally, what do you do with your day? And I
Right.
would think it would be incredibly heightened if you've been going on these kind of exciting, glamorous missions for 40 years, doing something as daredevil, as assassinating, as we say, folks who need killing. And then suddenly that's taken away. What are you just going to macrame? Like, what are you going to do with yourself?
That sounds miserable. Um, can I tell you one of my favorite characters in this latest novel, and I can't remember, I think she was in the first one, but it's their boss. Um, but the scenes with
Naomi. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. She gets a bigger role in this one. She is briefly in the first book, but she gets a significantly bigger role in this one.
She's hilarious. And I think what I appreciate about her are the scenes where so she is their boss, she is younger, she's a new mom, she's got like two little ones, and she's, the head of these assassins. And I kind of loved the juxtaposition of, these women who have been retired, right? And they're trying to find their footing. But Naomi's trying to find her footing as well. And her husband's just kind of going along, like helping to take care of the kids and, letting her assassin. And I mean, did you think about that as you were writing it? Like, okay, yes, we want to make Naomi a bigger character, but really almost like these two, you're on such two separate ends of the spectrum in your life.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
she's,
Well,
but she's right.
yeah, the assassins are 60, probably about 62 by the time this second book has come out. Naomi is around 35 probably.
Hmm.
And there's definitely a generational gap because I think you see it too when you look back at like second wave feminism and you see the women who are like, okay, maybe we're not going to try to do anything except have careers and break glass ceilings. We've got the pill. We can control whether or not we have children. We're going to make a choice
Right.
not to do those really traditional things. And then I think you have generations that have come along and said, let's try and have it all. And Naomi is very much struggling to figure out how
Yeah.
to have this extremely complicated and demanding career. And she's got a great, loving partner who, as I mentioned in the book, looks like Winston Duke, and
Yep.
knows how to braid his daughter's hair, and we love that for him. But at the same time, Naomi is a woman who is stretched pretty thin because there's the old saying, you can have it all, just not all at once. And Naomi is finding that that's a really tricky prospect to try to juggle everything with career and marriage and children and still, stay at the top of her game.
Mhm. And I thought it was just I mean, she really brings comic relief, I think Naomi does, but at the same time, there's a subtleness to her character where, I mean, a woman, my age where I was trying to do all of it, right? Have a career, have
Mhm.
kids. And you do just realize you're gonna get burnt out. It doesn't matter how great your partner is. And
Yeah,
and I
exactly,
just
because it's
you're
more
just
than
you
any
just
one
are.
person should be responsible for. It's too
Right.
much.
And It is, and that's what's so interesting too about the characters like Billy, for example. She never had children, right? But then you have
Hmm.
another another one of the main characters. She was married, she had children, right? And it's
No, none of
and
them
one
have
of
ever
them is
had children.
oh, I thought one of them did.
No, none
Oh,
of them
that's
ever
my
had
bad.
children. We have Natalie was a serial divorcer. Billy has, she gave up the idea of the white picket fence and the
Oh
2.5
yeah.
children because the man she was desperately in love with wanted those things, but she knew that
Hmm.
if she were to choose marriage, she would be shunted into the role of caretaking the house,
Right.
caretaking the
So he
kids,
got so
caretaking the
he married somebody else and had kids.
yeah, he marries somebody else who ends up wanting the same things that he does. And Billy, has chosen the work. She's chosen herself. And then Helen was happily married for a very long time, but never had children. And
Okay.
the Mary Alice is the one who is most recently married. And she has married quite late in life. And she and her wife have not really chosen to go that route. So
But
none of them,
they do have
I very much saw, they do have cats. I very much saw these four women as being in a place and in a time where they really felt like they had to choose which direction they went, and motherhood was never going to fit what they were trying to
cats.
do. And so they chose the
I
work, even if they
I think for
incorporated
some reason, I was going to say, I think for some reason I thought Helen had children because she'd been married for so long. So maybe we just make that
yeah.
assumption sometimes, right?
No, she didn't. And her husband bred, I think, Weimaraners for a while. But that's as close as she ever got to children. No, I very much wanted them to have the idea that they had to make a choice, that it
Yeah.
had to be the work or it had to be family life, but you couldn't do both because, in my mind, I'm thinking these women are recruited in 1979. In the 80s, you're going to notice if the mom is not available for the parent teacher meetings.
Guess
You're
what?
going to
In
notice if the
2025, they still notice that.
exactly, because in the 2010,
Hmm.
like my daughter is 30 now, but I remember when she was in high school, they absolutely, who's the first person they call? It's me, it's not my husband. And
Right.
I'm thinking,
Well,
seriously? Seriously?
can I
But
tell you?
no,
Can I
it's
tell you
exactly the way it is.
the only time the school didn't call me was when they knew I was in the hospital. So they did call my husband. That was
Honestly,
the
I'm
only time,
surprised.
right? I mean that's
I'm
the only time.
surprised they didn't try.
I think it's
It's
because
just
my
a
kid
little
reminded
coma.
them.
It's she could probably
I
answer a question.
she's fine. She probably can pick up the phone. It's fine.
Right? Hold it up to her
Well,
ear.
right. Well, before I let you go, Deanna, are we done with these four women or do you have more in the tank? Because I adore them and I want to see how Naomi tries to do it all.
Oh, God, love her. I really do. I love Naomi. I knew after I finished the first book that if they gave me a chance to write a second one, Naomi was absolutely going to have to make an appearance. I just enjoy her so much. I would love to write a third book. That is a conversation that I'm sure will be had with my publisher at some point, and hopefully that will be a thing that they want as well.
Well, I hope so too. Thank you so much for taking time to talk to us. Again, just I love these women, love the addition of Naomi. I think it's a great summer read. So we have had the pleasure of talking with Deanna Raybourn about her newest novel, Kills Well with Others. It is out now. This is the Idaho Matters podcast. I'm Gemma Gaudette.